And I just wanted to give a brief introductory remark to the presentation, the bulk of which will actually be provided by Peter Albert from the Municipal Transportation Agency. It's very fortuitous that Monique went through her executive director's report to really explain all that is going to be happening next week. And the city, as you probably are well aware, has been planning for the transportation demands of the America's Cup for the last over a year. By having both of these events coinciding on the Fleet Week weekend, it's a great opportunity to test out the transportation enhancements that have been incorporated into the People Plan, the America's Cup People Plan. And Peter is going to share with you today not only just kind of the outlines of some of those elements that really relate most directly to the Embarcadero waterfront, but also what the refinements have been from our experiences last month during the August World Series and how we're queuing that up for October. I think that one of the most key changes and refinements in the plans have to do with trying to create more pedestrian and bicycle accommodation along the Embarcadero itself. Fleet Week, as we all know, gets really inundated by cars and people. This year, with the People Plan, hopefully the benefits will accrue to Fleet Week as well as the America's Cup visitors. And it includes closure of the right-hand northbound lane along the Embarcadero so that we have more space for bicyclists, and then on the promenade itself, more space for pedestrians, while protecting access for those tenant businesses that still need to get into their facilities over the weekend, and to carve out the operational space needed to accommodate the 3 cruise calls that we also have that weekend. We're just going to be buzzing. So with that, I wanted to introduce Peter Albert, and he will present his PowerPoint. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane. Madam President, members of the Commission, Peter Albert from MTA. And a little background on the People Plan. This document is one of a dozen or about a dozen plans that were required to be prepared, or at least agreed to be prepared between the city and the America's Cup Event Authority. Clearly, transportation was one of the biggest sources of optimism and maybe anxiety about what we could do to make sure that the America's Cup experience is a positive one for San Francisco. We had a huge advantage in getting out ahead of this. Almost 18 months we've been working on this plan. The original People Plan, drafted in March, we refined it in September. And now what we're learning is it needs to be a living document because changes to the conditions, the experience we had in August, how we prepare for this coming week, and how we prepare for 2013, these are the things that really shape the plan and make the plan more responsive to the need. I start out with a lot of reassurance that what we saw in August was tremendously helpful for us who are doing the planning of transportation, and actually, frankly, a big relief. What we saw was more numbers coming in August than people conventionally thought were going to happen, and without the headaches of parking and congestion and a robust use of transit, robust use of bicycles, the valet parking for bicycles, the pedicabs even, all of the elements that came together in the People Plan that did the heavy duty. I'd say that the press has been really helpful, but there's a lot of lessons we've learned about how we can even be more ahead of the game in October. And what I'm going to do is run through some of the debrief of the experience, talk about where we want to go in October, and then I'd be happy to answer questions as well. There's only 10 slides or so in this, and I'll go through them pretty quickly. You may have seen the numbers. The crowd was estimated at about 150,000 people. The peak was Sunday, 40,000 people in the Marina Green. The coverage was really robust. We had 500,000 views on YouTube. There were 2,900 stories in 1,000 outlets just talking about the races and what they meant to San Francisco and how they went over. So the idea that it's an event for the Bay Area, but it's playing out on the Bay Arena, a little clever pun here, but really the images showing how photogenic San Francisco ended up being as a backdrop to these races and how attractive the races actually ended up being for people who are only nominally interested in sailing races. But for us in the transportation world, the reception was really rewarding for all of the work we did, with down to making sure we had enough parking control officers, traffic managers, bus drivers, and the degree of cooperation we got from BART, Caltrain, the ferries. We had generally perceived as having free and unparalleled access to the Marina Green, which is actually a pretty hard site to serve by transit. The enthusiasm came from sailors and non-sailors alike. There really were no significant complaints from the neighborhoods. We worked closely with the neighborhoods, especially around the Marina and the Presidio and the Russian Hill area where we thought the impacts would be greatest. The neighborhood groups hosted us in many conversations and really did a lot of advanced planning on their own that helped us work. We have reports now of economic benefits that came to the neighborhood commercial districts, and very unusual for Muni, back-to-back positive reviews about our service. What we learned, though, is where we can really focus to make sure that the events that come out in October and next year are even better. We want to really focus on safety enhancements. We need to make sure these events are safe. The sort of comparisons between the America's Cup and an international sporting event, and I like to remind people, this is the third largest international sporting event in terms of draw. After the Olympics, after the World Cup, hundreds of thousands of people come to the America's Cup, so we treat it as a safety event on so many levels. We want to focus on making sure that we improve the awareness of connections, whether you're trying to go from Muni to BART, whether you're trying to go from your bike to your bike valet parking facility, even the cab stands. We can work to make sure that the wayfinding, the signage, all of that helps people find these locations. And it is tricky when we've changed the site from the Marina Green to the Little Marina Green, but we're on it, and we have a whole shop right now producing the directional signs. Marketing and promotion, a big positive. We have a brochure now that we're going to be passing out, and we have a whole, I think 30,000 of them being printed right now. They show you how to get to the site on transit. They show you how to get to the site as a bicycle owner or as a bicycle renter. They recommend satellite parking, so if you want to drive, we encourage these facilities that are close enough to the site that people can make the shuttle or the walk, but still not so close to the site that they add to congestion and parking problems. And then we want to make sure that we build on the success we had just making this event more accessible. We did a lot of work with the Mayor's Office on Disability, with Muni's own Accessible Advisory Committee, to make sure there were accessible seats set aside, that their pathways to the seats from paratransit were open, and we're continuing to improve that. Some of the things that really help my work are within MTA. One of the most novel developments is the creation of an incident command system. And this is a legacy, I think, that will carry us through all large events in San Francisco. The idea that we're going to create a network headed by Lee Militello, who's an expert, a veteran of the police department for 30-some years, now at MTA, who makes sure that she knows who's in charge of Muni service planning, Muni operations, the engineers that are dealing with traffic management, even the outreach and promotion people, the service planning people. She has us all meeting on a weekly basis to get ahead of October and to figure out what are the legacies that we learned from August that need to carry over and where are the areas we need to correct. This is an extraordinary week that we're going to be seeing. This is only a partial list of what we know is going on. Fleet Week, 49ers game on Sunday. The Giants, should they make well, they're in the playoffs, it looks like. So where it depends on how much the home game is here, but this is all happening in San Francisco. Hardly Strictly Bluegrass. Pretty far away from the waterfront, but still a big draw on our buses, on our traffic engineers, even on the barricades we use to keep people safe. Italian Heritage Parade, same weekend. Castro Street Fair, same weekend. Decompression, which is a post-Burning Man event, same weekend. The cruise ship visit, we've been working closely with the port to make sure we understand those logistics and we get out ahead and make sure that we steer bicycles and pedestrians where they want to go, but not in the mix of where the cruise activity is happening, and we've done that. So all of this means we've gotten out early with the promotional and advertising, or the advisory campaign. We're working with employers, we're working with the tenants at the port to give them the information about planning ahead, about what's happening on the waterfront and when. The idea of the Embarcadero right lane is as much a safety issue as anything. It's not just a bike facility to give bikes space so that they're not competing for the sidewalk. It's also an emergency vehicle access lane, and that ends up being pretty important because if we see congestion, as we've seen in the past Fleet Week, to give ambulances and the fire department and the police department a straight shot to the heart of activities on a separated way could be a tremendous asset for safety. We've actually worked with the Department of Emergency Management on that facility. So we've also worked to round out, do we have enough parking control officers, police, traffic managers on the board? We have a plan now for not only how many there are, but where they will be stationed and how fluid they can be. Because the reality is we never really know day-to-day issues until the day happens. And knowing that we can move them around through an incident command structure to be from this place half an hour ago to this place in 15 minutes is part of our planning. Now, one of the big lifts we're giving Fleet Week that we've not seen before is the tremendous amount of cooperation we're getting from the region. BART, WETA, Golden Gate Transit, Caltrain, all of these regional providers are offering more service to carry people so that it's not just once they're in San Francisco, we're giving them alternatives to getting here. We're intercepting them in Hayward, in El Cerrito, in Larkspur, and giving them that transit so that they're not even bringing the car close to the city. We're actually marketing that at the airport so people can make their plans before they come to San Francisco, that they know they can hop on BART, maybe not rent the car, but come in on transit and actually be part of the foot traffic and the fun of the America's Cup. And then we're also doing a very vigorous TDM campaign. Transportation Demand Management means if you're an employer who just wants to make sure that your employees can get to work, we're giving you this advance notice and telling you to use these transportation services because they're not just for people watching races or going to Fleet Week. They're for everybody who need to go from one part of San Francisco to the other. There's been a lot of discussion about the lane treatment on Embarcadero. So October 6th and 7th, the Saturday and Sunday, we're taking the right-hand lane and the parking lane north of Washington Street to Bay. We're carving that out to make sure that that could be for bicycles and for wide enough for emergency vehicles. And then what happens is when it comes to Bay, we divert that bike traffic west so that it bypasses the heart of Fisherman's Wharf. It allows the lane closure north of that to serve the cruise activities, and it actually gives bicyclists a shortcut over to the Marina Green. So what we're trying to do is a little choreography to move the people safely where the crowds are greatest, because if you think about it, people do come in at the ferry building in Embarcadero BART, such a huge hub for tens of thousands of people who will be coming, and from that point they're working their way north. What we'd like to do is not mix bicycles and pedestrians on that same sidewalk because both volumes of peds and bikes will be swollen if this is the event that we believe it to be. So we're also looking at human beings that are making the smart decisions and how this is managed. The barricades and the barriers that we're putting in place have brakes at every driveway. Humans will be able to use their intelligence to make sure that if people need to have drop-off and delivery, they'll allow it. That's the beauty of working with parking control officers who are veterans of these kinds of events. And as I said, we also manage and make sure that we can accommodate the cruise activity, which is happening on the same weekend. So this is the schedule. I think I probably don't need to break it down too much. I'm sure you're aware, as Monique wisely put it in perspective, the real races are next year. These are the pre-races. We have Louis Vuitton from July 4th to September 1st. We have the America's Cup Finals, September 7th through 22nd. What shifts for us, and we're paying attention, is that the center of a lot of the activities moves over to Pier 2729. For me, it's a lot easier of an area to serve by transit. One of the legacies that we've seen in August that worked so well was the E-Line, the historic streetcar that was running from Caltrain north along the waterfront, past the ferry building, all the way to the wharf. There was some really good figures. About 8,700 people, as I understand the feedback from Muni, rode that service, meaning that that could be a permanent part of San Francisco's legacy if this works out well for moving people from ball games, let's say, to the ferry building, to the wharf. We'll be running that service again in October, and we'll look at running it in 2013. Other programs we hope to use Clipper Card even more comprehensively, having all of the transit providers accessible by one simple card so that a tourist doesn't have to dig in his or her pocket for exact change every time they go from BART to Muni, and getting those Clipper cards in large numbers out to people even before they get to San Francisco. Those are some of our campaigns for next summer. The Jefferson Public Realm, you've heard about that project. We're tracking that to make sure if that's under construction that it isn't in the way of all the pedestrians that will be coming in 2013, but it actually helps them strategically go from the streetcar terminal to the aquatic park. So they have a wonderful pedestrian experience from streetcar to public realm to park. The Brandon Street Wharf is one of the projects that we've tracked, the Pier 34 Promenade. They all seem to be coming online to make the pedestrian experience more, not just convenient and safe, but also more beautiful. And then we're also looking at completing the Marina to Fort Mason bike ped trail along Christie Field. Because even though the America's Cup headquarters will be at 2729, the Marina Green will still be programmed in 2013, and we expect visitors there as well. Here's an image for the 2013 Village at Piers 2729. Here's an image of Pier 3032. It will become an important a destination for people who love to watch the boats being assembled and put in the water. It's what's going to be happening this October. It'll be happening again in 2013. And again, it's right on that E-line and all the Muni Metro services that go to the ballpark now. We will be marketing those as options to get there. And actually, before I jump to questions, I do want to make a comment about planning for Fleet Week. We took this very seriously. We realized there was a great opportunity to help Fleet Week and give them all of this advanced planning on transit and transportation options in the marketing. The brochure is both a Fleet Week and an America's Cup brochure. And we're actually looking at the T3rd as a great connection to Pier 80, which ends up being very important for people who want to come down and see the ships that Monique said were coming down there. And luckily, we're augmenting the T3rd service as we normally would do for a candlestick event. This way, we're getting the most efficiency out of that light rail line as it goes by Pier 80. So with that, I'd be happy to take any questions about how ready we are and where you'd like us to go next.
Is there any other public comment? Okay. Commissioners, comments, questions?
I think we certainly have our work cut out for us this coming weekend, but my sense is if that works, it'll make the America's Cup in 2013 look like a piece of cake. One thing, I would, be curious about, as was pointed out by the prior speaker, we do have a number of tourists in town, and will there be any extra steps taken to try and focus on some of the pedestrian safety issues?
Thank you. Through the chair, Peter Albert again from MTA. The incident command system, that structure I outlined, is going to be monitoring, obviously, how well we do with this super event in October. We absolutely have debrief sessions planned for post-October, pre-2013, and with Lee Militello making sure that we staff up. I think the big question is staffing up and then positioning. So the short answer is yes. We're watching this as lessons learned, as a legacy. I think the great opportunity is how fluid we are and making sure that we're smart about where we think we wanted to dispatch people and where we actually needed them to be. So I think between now and October, that's going to continue to be the focus of our conversation.
Commissioner Brandon? Thank you for the presentation. I do have a couple of comments, and I think you all have worked very hard, and appreciate the fact that you do view that this is a living situation, because I think we go from experience to experience and we learn. Thank you. So, Peter, I do have some questions, I guess. I didn't hear you mention ferries. In terms of, are there extra ferries coming?
Good question. The ferry lines are, and Peter probably knows even better than I do, and I'll let him answer. Yes, there'll be plenty of ferries, and activity will be fully staffed. We're actually even trying to get the water taxi up and operating for a special service between Pier 1.5 and Chrissy Field during that race day. So ferries will, he probably has all the metrics, but yes.
Thanks. Thank you, through the chair again. Peter Albert. We are working with WETA, we're working with Golden Gate. They've slated that they would have extra service on select lines. Working with Golden Gate, for instance, they told me they saw that there would be a probably need for one at Sausalito and one at Larkspur. But they said what they've done is they've shadowed the boat service they've got, and that's how they handle special events. So they're aware that there'll be this greater demand with ferries. And what they'll do is put the boat where there's starting to be an overflow crowd already getting on one line. They have that experience already with special events. WETA is also preparing to run an extra service from Oakland Alameda and an extra service from Vallejo.
Okay, and then in terms of all of the buses, since this is really going to tax Moody, you're adding buses, and I mean it's just maximum capacity in terms of the routes that go to where America's Cup and Fleet Week are going to be?
Right. The document that you have, I think that was passed out with you, is the updated version of the people plan. And some of the explicit information in there reflects what we're doing for October. It will be revised again after October. But we have the opportunity, because the weekend is the time when the bus fleets tend to have more reserve, because they're more heavily used during the weekdays and the commute period. We've already figured out how many buses we need to run to accommodate the extra service that's running roughly between 10 and 7 for America's Cup Fleet Week. And we have to accommodate the extra buses going out to Hardly Strictly Bluegrass at Golden Gate Park. So now we're down to which types of buses and where they're going. We have room with the light rail, which is good because they may be needed for the T3rd and also the ball game. And then the historic streetcars, we're down to understanding exactly what kind of streetcar can serve the E, how many of them need to be rehabilitated and ready to be running by October, and how that comes online. So the answer is yes, a pretty detailed service plan getting us prepared for exactly this kind of extra frequency on these 2 days.
And is this bus service more or less like I guess, an express, meaning that you just go straight from point to point? It's not the regular stop at every 2 blocks.
One line will be served as a limited. It'll be the 47. The opportunity is that people can try what it's like to have a limited service from, let's say, Civic Center BART, where we'll have it stop, to the Marina Green area. The other buses will just run basic service as we propose. We found in August, we tried augmenting other lines with limiteds on the 43 and short lines on the 22, and they weren't all that well used. And what we found was Golden Gate Transit, which runs bus service from Marin and Sonoma into San Francisco, actually picked up a lot of the people who were trying to go from one part of the northern waterfront to Crissy Field. So they're kicking in extra service and actually giving Muni more bandwidth to put its buses out to Golden Gate Park.
And so I just, the other question, I'm sorry to get into details, but I think we're all very excited about this, but concerned about how people are going to get around. And so in terms of like some of the major hotels around Union Square, are they having any type of private bus service that will help people get to these venues?
They certainly are encouraged to do that. The people plan allows for the private companies to offer whatever shuttles, and I've certainly fielded a lot of interest in that. We're working in advance with the concierge industry. They're helping with the transit brochures. What we hope they do is encourage people to take advantage of the augmented services we've got in place, because we thought about destinations as hotels, as hospitality centers where visitors come. So Union Square, Fisherman's Wharf, the CBD there, they probably don't need to run shuttles if they're marketing the services we've already got up and running. And that actually worked out very well in August. I don't know if people saw that BART had one of its top 10 ridership days during the August races. And so that showed that we could rely on the existing service already scheduled and just use it more efficiently.
And then lastly, you did mention that there would be satellite parking lots, and I wish I'd known about that because I had a terrible time trying to figure out where to park. So where are the satellite parking lots? And then from the parking lots to the actual Marina Green area, is there a different type of shuttle that the city is providing, or?
The satellite parking lots are around the locations where there's either a transit hub or a bicycle rental hub. And so the locations we identified include UCSF, USF. They're a little farther from the waterfront. We have Civic Center and Performing Arts Garage identified, which is right on that 47 limited line. We have the downtown garages that are close to the E line and the F line. And what we've done, it's not that we're opening up garages that are closed. We're just helping people find these facilities that tend to have capacity on the weekends, and then we contacted the garage owners to help them anticipate bigger crowds. But the combination of giving them, they could do it on foot, they could do it on these augmented transit, or I didn't talk about Parkwide. Parkwide is a coalition of bike rental companies that has 4 station areas in San Francisco. Union Square, Justin Herman Plaza right by here, the Marina Green, fortunately, which is a great station for this, and Golden Gate Park. And the satellite parking lines up nicely with these parking stations, so you could park there, pick up a rental bike, ride it to the Marina Green, drop it off there and take a cab back or get a ride back some other way, and that gives you that extra flexibility.
And you just mentioned cabs, and so the cabs are going to be organized in a way that they'll be right around the areas where they expect most people. They are.
We're actually, I heard that we're looking at having 150 more cabs running than a typical weekend to accommodate the demand.
Okay, I think I've run through the gamut here. So I also did that for the record, just so people could hear as well. But I think it's going to be very exciting, and I am debating whether I'm going to try this and actually get into the mix or stay away.
Bike it.
Obviously, what we'd love to do is that everyone comes, tries it, and it comes back with a really positive experience, that they're not afraid to come, but that they're finding that it's more fun to come in a way that doesn't require parking, gridlock, and congestion, but actually enjoys the beautiful waterfront and the fun services. I mean, ferry and historic streetcars, people come from all over the world just to ride these. It's about time that we saw them as not just a tourist attraction, but also a fundamental way to get from A to B.
But I would imagine some employers may be encouraging more telecommuting, so they just don't come into downtown San Francisco at all this week.
The transportation demand management program includes telecommuting and giving those employers that heads up and that option to work it out with their employers.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Peter, sorry, I had a few other questions too. As you did touch on taxi cabs, and it's not just the taxi companies, but have we done anything to ensure that taxis will honor calls? For example, you always hear complaints. I mean, I know it's not possible to work with them, but have we done something to sort of alert or get the message out to cab drivers as well of sort of the need for the added need for their services? That's the first question. Second would be just in terms of distributing any bike route maps so that if at the hotels or elsewhere where we have people in town or even locals, recognizing that there may be some added ease for movement with bicycles. But a third point that jumps out at me was during our first World Series, that was sort of the only major thing in town. And so we got 150,000 people there. This weekend, or the weekend we're referring to now, there's going to be a lot of competition, so it'll be accounted for sort of shuttles to all the different parts of town as well.
So there were three questions. The first one being about the cabs. So the MTA, luckily, we manage the cabs as well. So Jarvis Murray, for instance, has been a regular part of the incident command system meetings, and that's exactly what he's doing, is making sure that he's telling his drivers, cab operators, where we are, where we need them to be. That's how I got that number of 150. For the public information brochure that includes transit, it does have a select, not the comprehensive bike-wide, but really what we consider to be the best and most usable for tourist bike routes, really clearly put in place. I didn't talk about there's so many things that went into the people plan. You might have already seen the temporary wayfinding that we hope becomes a permanent part of our infrastructure. We got a lot of mileage out of the great work Dan Hodap from the port has done and extended that wayfinding system for pedestrians all the way to Chrissy Field, Marina Green, and actually included projections of how long it takes to walk from the ferry building to Fort Mason so people get better information. Now we're rolling out a similar system for bicycles. You'll see a fledgling bicycle wayfinding system with real-time information about how long it takes to ride from point A to point B. It's one of the things we'd like to pilot as well, and if that works well, it could be much more of a systematic approach to bicycle. The third, I'm sorry, Commissioner Katz, the third question was?
Just the differential of this particular weekend with all the Fleet Week activities, the Giants playoffs,
Yes.
49ers game.
Thank you.
I mean,
Well, one thing we didn't do, which I think is smart, is we didn't treat it like we were just planning for America's Cup, and someone else was going to be planning for Fleet Week, and someone else was going to be planning for Heart of the Strictly Bluegrass. Working with the Incident Command System, we put them all on the table. There's a great mini bulletin that I just looked at last night that talks about all the services that we're marketing, how to get there, and the brochure, the transit brochure that's accessible now on our website and on the OEWD website, identifies 3 hubs. Civic Center is a hub. If you're trying to go to Hardly Strictly Bluegrass, here's the 5L. If you're going to America's Cup or Fleet Week, here's the 47L, where those buses are. So those are with the concierges. The concierges now have a PDF of that. When a guest comes in the morning and says, how do I get to this point? They press print, give them a colored copy of that brochure, whether it's bike or transit, shows those hubs. And what we'd like is that you just have a great time in San Francisco that weekend. I think people are going to sample a little bit of everything, and that's exactly what we want them to do.
Okay, thank you very much.
thank you and everyone who put so much time and effort into this. It's